Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised pepperball hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for pepperball, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of this pepperball system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, pepperball is the first option in my correctional toolbox. One of the most dangerous times for officers is during cell extractions. Pepperball allows officers to respond with the lowest level of force and still be effective and ready if the situation escalates. The responding officer controls where the projectiles are aimed, how many projectiles are launched, and how rapidly they're deployed. This allows the response to be tailored to the moment. To learn more about pepperball, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in the show's information guide. Pepperball is the safer option first. So, welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. This is Mike Cantrell, and today I'm doing an interview with Robert Greenwood. Robert has had 35 years of experience working in the Michigan Department of Corrections, and that's been in prison administration, community corrections. He's been a correctional officer, a resident unit officer, transportation officer, trainer, cell block supervisor, captain, deputy director of safety and security for the Center for Forensic Psychiatry. He's also worked in community corrections as a parole agent, probation officer, and retired as a probation manager over a large office in Metro Detroit. So over 35 years, he's held a lot of positions, and he's now teaching criminal justice at a local college, and we'll go into that and find out where he's at and how that's going. But welcome to the Prison Officer Podcast, Robert.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a true pleasure to be on a podcast such as this.
Absolutely. I'm interested to hear about your career. It seems like you've had quite a varied career and got to do a lot of steps, but I always like to start at the beginning. So if you would, kind of tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? And
all right. Well, I grew up in Ypsilanti, which is about 30 miles from west of Detroit, in that area in Michigan, and grew up there. I had two other brothers. My dad was actually a military man. He served in the U.S. Navy. So we kind of had that structure, that mindset. We're being raised in a military household. With that being said, my dad sent us to a private school. And it was I would call it semi-military school. We did marching. We had standards that we had to meet. As far as having our haircuts a certain way, the girls had to wear dresses. They couldn't be past it, or they had to be to the knees. Every Monday we had a check where we went into a room and they checked us all out. If we weren't ready for school, they'd send us home. If we got in trouble, and they did this back in other schools, but we got disciplined with a paddle. That would not happen today in today's world, but I've been I went to the principal's office a few times for doing it, normal childhood stuff, maybe not normal, but
sure.
Got in a few fights, got in some trouble and had to go see the principal. So, that way, then we had the military, structure at home, and I had it at school as well. And I think that's kind of what, shaped me of where I wanted to go in my career as well.
Right.
So that's starting off there. What happened, like I said, my upbringing in Ypsilanti, Michigan, had a pretty normal, childhood. Had both my parents, they took us to church every Sunday, basically every time the door was open. So I had that structure there as well.
Right.
It all worked out good for me in the long run, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's, pretty much
so
my
did you
upbringing.
know anybody? Did you know anybody in corrections early in your life, or was that something that you found out about later?
Yeah, good question. When I graduated, my dad said, "Thank you, son, for graduating. Congratulations. However, you got to get a full-time job and look about moving out." It's time to do some things, either military. So I got a full-time job. I was driving a high-low in a warehouse. And I said, it wasn't a well-paying job, but okay. Back in the 80s, I graduated in 1981 from high school. And I didn't want to do that for a career. So I started looking around. And, of course, I looked at law enforcement. So I looked at the police. I went to a few interviews, didn't hear nothing back. And then I did some research and I looked at correction officers. So I took a civil service test. In Michigan, you had to take a test for that. And I came back and my test scores came back. However, I didn't hear anything. So what I did was on my lunch break, while I was still working in a warehouse, I started calling some local prisons. So I called one in Jackson, which is drivable. It's about 45 minutes from my house. I called the one in Ypsilanti. That was only about 15 minutes from my house. And I called another one in Ionia, which would have been about an hour and 15-minute drive. So I got lucky. The one here in Valley Men's was actually doing some hiring. So they took my name and number, and then they called me back for an interview. And I'll never forget that interview. I had it with a deputy warden and a human resource director, just two people. And we had the interview in the front lobby where people come in to do visits. So it's not very private. We had a little corner roped off for the interview. They had a few questions, weren't very many. It wasn't hard. It wasn't like, let's look at your resume or let's look at your transcripts. It was basically a few questions they asked that I really paid attention to. Can you be at work on time? Can you work long shift hours? Can you fight? And so I was kind of thinking, okay, this is going pretty good. I can check the boxes on that. I did. Being in a military home, I knew that you have to be at work when you're supposed to be. You can't call off sick. You have to be on time. So I thought, okay, this is pretty good. It went pretty well. I thought I answered the questions pretty well. So they said, of course, a traditional interview, someone will get back to you. And so lucky enough, I got a call back. And I was scheduled to start the academy in April of 1984. I interviewed later in 1983 around November, December. So it took a few months because it has to go through Lansing, which is our main hub for all the hiring. So it just takes a while to get the names processed through. So started my career at the training academy again in April of 1984.
It's interesting. And you say your path sounds a lot like mine in a couple of ways. One, people don't realize these days there was competition for these jobs when you and I were hiring on. You couldn't just apply for corrections and get on sometimes, which they're not used to these days. If you'll apply, you'll get hired just about. But I had the captain sitting in my interview ask me the same thing, and I didn't know how to answer the question. He said, you ever been in a fight? And so I kind of froze because do they want to hear, I fought, or do they want to not know that I'm some butthole who's going to show up, swinging at everybody? And I kind of said, yeah. He said, have you ever won any? And I said a few. And that was the only question the captain asked me. Now, everything else came from the HR people, but it's kind of interesting that you kind of had that same interview process.
Yeah.
Had you, you didn't take any college?
A lot too with dependability. Yep.
Oh, I was just going to ask. So did you take any college before you started, or did you started taking college classes after you were in corrections?
No, I didn't have any college before I started.
Okay.
I just had the high school diploma, and that's all that was needed, either a high school diploma or a GED. The first time I walked in, actually, what we do was in the academy, we did 6 weeks of classroom training, a lot of modules, a book kind of stuff we go through, policy, procedure. And then after 6 weeks, we went into the prison, and it's called on-the-job training, OJT. So we have an officer assigned to us, a training officer, FTO, field training officer assigned to us. And then that's when you realize where you're at. When you go inside and you look around, and then you know that it's serious business. When you go down to the chow hall, for instance, and you see hundreds of guys in there, and you might look around and see 4 or 5 of correction officers standing around. So the magnitude, how serious it is once you're in when you step into a prison. Here in Valley Men's Prison was opened in 1981. It was built for a medium security prison. However, the state needed maximum security space. So after it was opened, they turned it over to a maximum security prison. So that was the first prison that I was assigned to, maximum security. As you know, as some of the listeners probably know, it's all based on prisoner to officer ratios. So when we worked in a housing unit, a regular housing, a GP, general population housing unit, we had 80 prisoners back then before they double bunked, and there was 2 correction officers. So that kind of gives the numbers for maximum security. And then we had 6 housing units, so you can add them together when they're doing chow hall. They got to get everybody fed. I worked a lot of day shift, but I worked all 3 shifts. So that means we got to feed 2. We got to feed breakfast and lunch. So half the shift was actually feeding them, getting them ready, getting them up, getting them over there, getting them back, getting them locked up, and then repeat the cycle again for lunch.
Absolutely. So what was the thing that surprised you the most when you first walked into prison that first time and you looked around? You know, most of us have a thought that from books or from TV or from media about what we think prison is. What was the thing that surprised you the most when you walked in there?
Back when I started in early 80s, there was no TV shows. There was not much on corrections, as a lot of it was kind of like taboo. The public didn't really want to talk about it. Wasn't much. It's kind of unknown. So when I walked in, I didn't really know what to expect. The thing that surprised me the most was it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be fighting every second, but the prisoners definitely looked at them. They were sizing me up. We call it marquetting. I don't know. That's a term in Michigan Department of Corrections. It's actually a prison up in the UP in the Upper Peninsula. And what it is the prisoners would stare you down to see just to see how you would react. So I was warned about the marquetting. So that kind of, it didn't surprise me, but it still did when I was, my first day, I had a few prisoners, marquetting me to see how I'd react. I got some really good advice from other officers, experienced officers, veteran officers. They said the best thing to do is when they're marquetting you, do not look away. Do not let it intimidate you. The best thing I would do is just approach them and let them know, hey, is there a problem? Do you need anything? And if it goes awry, one officer said, just ask for their ID. And most correction officers knows what that means. If you ask for their ID, there might be a major misconduct coming next. You have to ID them, positively ID them. And that was kind of like the way that I kind of carried myself. So I went straight up to a table on my first day, and I asked them, is there any problem? Is there anything you need? Of course, they knew I was brand new. I mean, that's their world. They live there, sleep there 24/7. They knew I was new, but I had to try to carry myself where I had some, time underneath my belt, which I did not. But I figured, hey, I'm gonna start this. I love being a correction officer. I love the stuff that came along with it. So I just kind of, let's go. I'm going to try my best at it. And that's how I approached my first day on the job.
No, that's great. And I think that's a great tip for rookies, because I learned to do the same thing. Inmates don't want you to know who they are. And so I didn't do it when I first started, but I learned that if I had inmates who were trying to avoid me, the first thing I'd go do is walk up to them and say, hey, let me see your ID. And then I'd look at their ID and, you're so-and-so. And that sets them back a step. They don't want you knowing who they are, and that always puts you, it just puts you on the positive side of that interaction, because now I have information about you. And it usually makes them take a step back and think about what they're doing without having to have a confrontation. So I think that's a real good tip there that you had for somebody that's going into corrections to do that.
Absolutely.
So what was your how long were you a CO, and then what was your next step?
Well, back to the education question. When I was a CO, we had assistant resident unit supervisors in each of the housing units. Somehow, backing up a little bit, I worked all the assignments. I worked all 3 shifts, especially when you're new, you're bounced around. It's all done by seniority. I was very lucky to get on day shift after only 9 months. A position came up. I put my name in for a transfer, so that's unheard of nowadays, but I got on day shift only in 9 months. So I started working everywhere. We had, of course, housing units is a big assignment because that's where a lot of your staff go to. Yard positions, gun towers, food service, the buildings like healthcare and school and gymnasium. So I tended to work, I guess, the best in house units. The sergeants and lieutenants probably gave that word up to the captains, who usually made the shift assignments. So I wound up being in the housing units, and then a bid position came open in one of them, and it was in in Michigan, the first mental health unit. They're called treatment environment PE units now, but it was the first one in Michigan. It was kind of like a pilot project. So it was in the unit that I was already working, so we kind of turned it over, and I liked it. We had more staffing. I really liked that part. We had 6 staff to 80 prisoners, so wow. I enjoyed that, having more officers around. And I put my name in for a bid, and I was awarded the bid, so I kind of stayed right there in housing. And then I worked there for about a few years, and I decided, hey, I want to go back to school. So I put myself through night school. I was on day shift, and I went to evening. Back then, they didn't have the choice of taking online classes like they do now. So I took evening classes at a local university in Ann Arbor, a smaller university called Concordia University. So I went there and I had some credits that transferred from a community college. And then I was able to get my bachelor's degree while I was still working. And then, so in Michigan, you qualify for a little bit more positions once you get your bachelor's degree. And so I put my name in on the list. And then the next thing I qualified was for some other positions, such as assistant resident unit supervisor, which I told earlier that we had 2 of them in each unit. So, but before that, while I was working about 5 or 6 years on the job, they needed some acting sergeants, and someone came to me, an assistant deputy warden. I said, sure, I'd like to try that. I can step it up. And so I ended up in segregation, being acting supervisor. Yep. And so we all know what that comes with it. There's a lot of critical incidents. You're doing a lot of report writing. You're doing a lot of cell extractions. So it was pretty much like throwing in a fire, I'd say, sink or swim. Really enjoyed that time. Actually went by really fast. I enjoyed what I was doing, but I knew it was a real serious job. I mean, you have to keep everything in order. We had 2 different sides. One was more of a step down on seg. The other side was punitive, where they were in there for either assaulting staff, assaulting other prisoners, maybe doing something illegal. They got caught. So they were on administrative side for a while till they got seen by a security classification committee, which would actually step them down to the other side. So we had a lot of critical incidents, flooding, you name it, we probably had it. My guys, when we were over there, I was supervising, some of them didn't even take their ERT, emergency response teams, gear off except for their helmets. That's right. How bad it was. We would just keep suited up, shin pads, all the stuff that comes with it, your protective gear. Sometimes they would just stay over there in the hot segregation, just ready for another cell extraction. That's just the way it was.
Right.
So did that a few years, and then I got a call to see if I wanted to be a assistant registered unit supervisor. So I took that. I learned a different phase of it. I was handling the paperwork, doing the pro eligibility reports, doing back court, which was a behavior adjustment groups, where they would come in there if the officers wrote a minor misconduct. I would have to find them guilty or not guilty, then approve sanctions for them. We had I could give up the 3 days top lock, 7 days loss of privileges, or community service, which would be just basically cleaning up the cell block or something. So like that job, however, did that for a while. And then with my degree and my experience in the other positions as a AdSeg sergeant, now assistant resident supervisor, a facility called Huron Valley Center called me for a captain's interview that I put my name in and then went for an interview and was able to secure that position. I was on the PM shift as a shift captain. I had 2 lieutenants. Yep.
So let me ask you,
go ahead,
at this time in your career, are you starting to think about leadership, or is it still more of I'm just that team leader and I'm taking my team forward? Or have you started thinking about how you affect the shift and how you affect the people working under you and some of the, challenges that come with leadership? Has that entered your mind yet, or is that, more when you became captain?
No, leadership was actually, I was learning it. Actually, be honest with you, I learned it when I was in the academy. I was looking around. I had 35 other cadets in the academy, and we all didn't have any experience, but I was listening to my trainers. I had 2 major trainers. They were training lieutenants, and I was listening to their career path, and I thought, wow, I need to start right away. I need to start developing some things. Now, of course, I wasn't a true leader, but I wanted to get there, and I wanted to learn that ethics is strong, morals are strong. My word is is very dear to me. I want to make sure my name is, well taken care of, respected. And so I started learning a little leadership actually in training. And even I remember when we used to do the 3-mile run, which they don't do any longer. Man, I trained for that. And I thought that's something I can control. So I trained for that, and I was very proud to say that I came in first in my class, man. I had another guy that was really fast in there as well. He ran track at actually at a big university, but I don't know. I just thought, I want to take my, best step in this. You only get one shot at it usually. So, I think it's from my upbringing as well. But when I started getting my other positions as, sergeant and assistant resident unit supervisor, I thought as well, if I'm going to tell someone to give an order, would I do it myself? I want to think about that. I want to think how I'm influencing people, the prisoners that I'm tasked to supervise, staff as well. And I wanted to make an impact. Was I the best every time? No, absolutely not. I learned from my mistakes, and I tried not to make the same mistake. That's one thing I did. I mean, sometimes we try our best, we're going to fall, but then we're measured how fast we get back up and learn from our mistakes. So, and I had some really good advice from other staff. They always said, tell the truth. You can lay your head on the pillow at night if you tell the truth. So I kind of, that motto would happen. Sometimes, it might not, go against everybody, against the, code of ethics, but in the long run, you're going to get to where I'm at. At the end of the day, you want to be truthful in what you do and make sure that we're, taking care of the prisoners that we're tasked with.
Absolutely. Great point. I know there's a lot of people, and I watched people over the years who would lie to the inmates, and I made it just part of who I was. I didn't lie to inmates. I never had a reason to. It was a yes or a no question. And once you learn to say no, you don't have to lie. You don't have to make up something. You can just tell them the truth. You're not getting that because policy says so. And the hard thing for a lot of staff is to say you're not getting that because I'm not doing that right now. And they don't want to put their self out there and show that inmate that they're making that decision. But once you get comfortable with that, you don't have to lie. You don't have to make up stories. And you're going to reap the rewards of that, like you were talking about. People are going to see you for the honest person that you are. So, yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up there about the honesty that you had inside. And that's probably what led you to, moving on up to the deputy and the captain's position.
Absolutely. If you start lying, it's just not telling the truth. It's going to lead to one lie after another. But if you're straight up and you just tell them this is the way it is, this is the way it's got to be, they're going to respect you more in the long run. That's staff, prisoners, whoever we work with. There's not much gray area, and I think people that go down that rabbit hole, that's what gets them in trouble. Again, if you're not honest with yourself, it's eventually going to catch up. I mean, you just got to be honest and let the prisoners know, this is what policy procedure says. This is what the housing unit policy says. This is what the yard policy says. I'm enforcing it. I'm going to, if we have some issues here, come to me, talk to me, but this is the way it's going to be. I think if you're pretty much straight up with them and you let them know how you are, it's going to make your day a lot easier. You're going to feel good about yourself. Other people are going to see it and take notice. When Officer Greenwood comes on the rock, we kind of know how it is. He's definitely going to, talk to us. He's going to let us know. But there's only so, we're not going to be running free. And
right.
Where I've seen some of the housing units, and wow, I walk down, I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Who's running this show? So, you just gotta stand up and just stick behind your morals, and it'll all be good at the end of the day.
Right. Excellent. So now you've moved up and you've taken a job as a captain or deputy captain?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Tell me about that.
A captain over at Huron Valley Center on afternoon shift. Huron Valley Center was kind of unique. It was ran by Michigan Department of Community Health. However, we had Michigan Department of Correction prisoners. It was a mental health institution, prison / if you walked in it, if you looked at it, it was surrounded by barbed wire. However, these guys need a lot of help, the prisoners. There's a lot of assaults going on as well. We all know with mentally ill prisoners compounded with, with the mental health factor, there's going to be a lot more violence, stuff that's triggered that we don't know about. We might not be see it coming. So there's a lot of critical incidents there. Had a really good staff. Like I said, the first thing I did, the first day I had 2 lieutenants. I talked to them. What do you guys like to do? Where do you guys want to be in 5 years? I had one sergeant that really loved lieutenant that really loved doing paperwork. He was really good at it. So, I appointed him kind of the administrative lieutenant. He took care of a lot of the paperwork. And then I had another lieutenant that liked to be more hands-on. So he, was more out on the compound, doing chow lines, making rounds. And so it worked out really good. It made my job a lot easier. It made me look really smart, but I wasn't. It was just my lieutenants were very knowledgeable and made my job a lot easier. So, but I did like to run roll call. We had roll call about 12 minutes per shift. Before shift, and so we'd go with all the pertinent information that we got from the previous 24 hours. And I always like to run roll call. I always like to, get a feel for my staff, let them know if any incidents they need to pay attention to, if anything that we learned from the previous shifts or maybe anywhere else out in that prison. So, but anyways, it worked out really well. I also like to do a lot of rounds. I like to handle not all, but many of the cell extractions as well. Through my experience at working at the maximum security as a ADSEG sergeant, really came in handy. So like to go down there and supervise them and then offer any advice that I would have through my experience that I've also witnessed over the years. So it worked out really well. Just giving out, good advice that I learned along the line from outstanding staff that I had the privilege to work under.
Absolutely. So what year is this? What year are you captain?
This was in year 1999, so just about to turn.
So in 1995, you had an incident that you were involved in, right? Tell me about where you were at then.
Yeah, 1995. Actually, in 1993, I'll back up. I transferred from Huron Valley Men's to Gus Harrison Correctional Facility, and that's in Adrian, Michigan, which is not too far from the Ohio borderline between Michigan and Ohio, down the southern part of the state of Michigan. Transferred there as a resident unit officer, so it was a lateral transfer. And Gus Harrison Correctional Facility was a multi-level, so we had minimum, medium, and close security. Close security is one under maximum security, to explain, so we had those 3 levels. And in 1995, I was working in Housing Unit 5, which was the close security prison side. We had 2 housing units that were level 4 back then, close security. And in 1995 is where I was on the afternoon shift, the PM shift. When I transferred from here in Valley Men's to Gus Harrison, most transfers, you have to go to afternoon shift. That's where the need is. But I really enjoyed the afternoon shift, and I could have transferred off it, but for some reason I stayed on afternoons. I got used to it. I got used to the schedule, and it was 2 to 10, so it wasn't bad. So I stayed on that shift. The makeup of the unit was we had 3 RUOs, resident unit officers, correction officers, and 1 block sergeant. So then after that, I was like, we were going to stay there. And then once they started coming back, I'm going to back up. A couple weeks prior to that, we had an incident where the prisoners were a little slow to lock up. And this was in the evening meal when they were returning. We had a hard time getting them in, but we were successful getting them in. And about 2 weeks later, it was August 13th. It was after they were coming in again from evening yard. And we had a good majority of the housing units. They were double bunked then. And so the double bunk, we had 160 prisoners in each cell block. And they were coming in. I would have to guess maybe 120 was out. It was a hot day, right, in August. They wanted to be out. There was no air conditioning in our unit, so they were out enjoying the nice evening. And they started trickling in. And the other officers and I noticed that they weren't locking up. They were hanging around the officer station, which is a bulkhead, we'll call it. And we would look at each other and say, we'd give our direct orders, go ahead, lock up. I'll go down here. We had 2 different ways to lock them up. We could actually do the old key method, walk down on the corridor and let them in. Or we had, at the officer station, we had an electronic locking system as well. So we could just basically push a button to let them into their cell. So we were trying that and unsuccessful. There was none of them going down and locking up. So I looked at my partner and said, this isn't going to end well. I think something's not right here. You get a feeling in your gut when you work inside. You're thinking, something's not right here now. I was there last, 2 weeks prior, and I thought, wow. So we, again, got most of them back in from yard. So now we secured the outside door. Now we have approximately 80 to 100. I would have to guess. Some of those did lock up, maybe a couple of them. But I'd have to guess 80 to 100 were still on the bulkhead. And again, there's 4 correction officers. There's a number. So they weren't doing anything. They were standing against the walls. And so we started, we call it control center. And we advised them what was going on. And then the lieutenant, who was the highest ranking person on shift, said, go ahead and start giving you direct orders, which is I'm giving you a direct order to lock up. If they refuse that direct order, that's valid. We could go ahead and write a major misconduct. However, that was irrelevant in this situation. So we started going around IDing them, getting their IDs and saying, I'm giving you a direct order. Okay. They're just staring at us. They didn't say anything. They weren't being belligerent. So we did that number. And then we didn't get one of them to lock up. So we had, I would say about 10 to 15 prisoners in one of the day rooms. Those that work in corrections know not everyone goes over to chow hall for one reason or not. So we let them cook up, it's called. So they do their cook-ups in the day room. They have a microwave in there. they can cook up some stuff they get from the prison store. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they seen what's going on, and maybe they were part of it, the early stages of planning it. So one of them faked a medical emergency, like he was having a heart attack or something. So he fell on the ground, and one of the officers opened the door to check on him, and all those 10 to 15 prisoners bum rushed that door and just forced their way out of there. It was a locked door before that, but they forced it. And once they started pushing us and getting out to the rock, everyone that's standing on the rock refusing to lock up all joined into the big melee. So now we got probably 110, if I had to guess, prisoners to control. So wow. At that time, we started going on the radio, going live. Hey, Code Blue, that was our signal for we're losing. That was our signal where we need help, basically. Mm-hmm. So they were sending all available staff to Housing Unit 5. You can't send everyone, right? You got to send available staff because you got to man the other sites as well. So we ended up with about 10 or 15 correction officers, which is really a good number, but we were still out numbered. So we were holding our own. We were going back and forth. Not a lot was said. Only thing I remember was there was just a lot of, when you hear that key sound, and if you worked in corrections, you know what I'm talking about. When you hear keys jingle or hit the ground or moving around really fast, someone's running to a Code Blue. So that's really what I remember in the incident was a lot of that, a lot of stop, yelling, and but what was eerie about it, not that much of the prisoners were yelling or screaming. It was just like they had a mission that they wanted to hurt correction officers, I guess. And that's what they were trying to do.
Wow. So did you guys, at that time, did you have any disturbance control CERT teams? Had you guys practiced with CS? I mean, OC was pretty new back then. Anything like that you guys were bringing out? Or was this just you guys standing in a line and them standing in a line?
It was us standing in a line, them standing in a line, partly because we had all available staff that could go to that unit. So we really didn't have no one to form. We call them emergency response team. So we really didn't have enough to have an ERT team. They were all available staff for that unit. While that was happening, they overtook the other unit next to us, Housing Unit 4. Those prisoners must have got wind of it. Not all of them locked up. So they were doing the same thing in Housing Unit 4. They were overtaking it. So what we did was we was doing the best we could. I remember since that was my housing unit that started, I kind of started at the electronic station where it opened the doors. And then once it started, prisoners started trying to jump over there and try to open other prisoners by unlocking their locks. So my partner and I, we were holding tough. We were making sure that they wouldn't come over. If they did, we would take care of our business. And it got to the point where there was officers seriously injured. So we abandoned our post at that point and we started helping injured staff. I'm talking injured staff were knocked out. Teeth was missing. I mean, it was bad. It was a really bad scene. And all I remember was we're just trying to get everybody out of there. And I kept thinking, how are we going to get out of here? We don't have any weapons. We're outnumbered. Now we got staff that can't even walk. And one person said, and I'll never forget this guy had a lot of time in, he said, get the wounded and let's get out. But he said it in a way where everybody could pretty much hear it, the officers. And so enough of us heard it. And then I started going on the piles that I was already on while myself is being assaulted. Some officers, like I said, was knocked out. What they did was they were grabbing everything that they could to use as a weapon. And one officer was hit with a microwave. So you can imagine the damage that would do. And so we got the wounded and we got them in a circle. And we just backed out of the housing unit like that. I don't know how we got out of that housing unit. I don't know how they let us out without grabbing a hostage, but we were able to grab everyone, the wounded, and we backed out. We got out successfully, and then we started doing head counts, but we don't know who came over. It was in heat of the battle, so we were hoping everybody was out, but we really did not know, and that was my first concern. I hope we got everybody out, because I hope they didn't drag someone down to one of the cells. We weren't, because, you're just basically fighting for your life. And one thing that I do regret is I was one of the last 3 out of the housing units, and I grabbed garbage cans, anything I could to block stuff from being hit. Everything that you can imagine was being thrown at us. Broken glass, the microwave. They went and got anything they could to throw at us, but I was blocking it the best I could with the garbage cans along with 2 other officers. And after it was done and said at that point, later on, only 3 of us got accommodation letters, and I went to my captain. I said, "That's a bunch of crap. Everyone in that unit should have got accommodation letter," but that was up to the higher ups. Yeah. So that's the only thing I really regretted. Like I said, it went over to another housing unit next to us in Housing Unit 4, and then it went over to one of the medium housing units, Housing Unit 2. So they had control of 3 units out of 6. So this happened again. Remember, it started around 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. We lost that unit. We lost 2 other units. And so myself, once I got up to the muster room, we got out of the units, we got the wounded, we carried them up to healthcare. We had like a little emergency thing set up that we could get them medical care. Of course, they went out to the hospitals. We had ambulances just running up to the prison all night. And then, so the lieutenant told me, "Hey, Greenwood, grab a shotgun and go out to the vehicle sally port, so they don't try to escape." We don't know. By then, the state police was manning our perimeter. And so I grabbed a shotgun and went out to the vehicle sally port to man that position. And then that's the last thing I remember. I passed out in the vehicle sally port, and I myself was taken to the hospital. So that's kind of what happened that night. And I had some head injuries. But, in the heat of battle, when you got all that adrenaline flowing, you just do what you got to do. So I wound up at the hospital that evening, a local hospital, Bixby Hospital in Adrian. And I was okay. But that kind of was how it unfolded that night.
Wow. How long did it take you guys to get the unit back, or the prison back?
Good question. By then they called our central prison administrators in Lansing. And then they called a bunch of gun squads that were on hold. So basically we had a platoon assembled the next day. So they had control of the 3 units all night.
Wow.
From approximately 8:30 at night until the next morning. So a bunch of gun squads came down, platoons. They called emergency response teams from all across Michigan responded. And then they got their game plan down together. We got our game plan down together. And then the deputy director of corrections back then got us all together. And then he said, "We're going to take back the units one at a time." So what they did was we started in Housing Unit 5, the one where I was assigned, we originated out of. And they shot a bunch of gas in there first. All the windows were already broken, pretty much. So they shot a bunch of gas grenades in there and let that cook up for a while. So about an hour later, after administering a bunch of tear gas, you can imagine they didn't want any. We came in with gun squads, with shotguns. We're trained for that. We do, we're ready for training. So when we came in, we had no problems. Most of the prisoners were already back in their cells. But there was a few of them that were laying around, but they followed our orders to the T. Yeah. We had no problems taking back the units. So that's how they retook the units back. And then afterwards, now the fun starts where we have to write all the major misconducts of what happened.
Oh, yeah.
And that was pretty difficult because what they did were they were smart. Back then we had cameras. They took the cameras out first. So they busted the cameras. So, of course, they wouldn't be on camera where we could identify them. However, all of us, especially the ones that worked in the house units, remember we was going around taking their names? Well, for those of us that still had that pad, that if we didn't lose it during the riot disturbance, I was one of them. I had it wrote down, so that helped me out later on trying to write rioting tickets, failure to obey orders, so on and so forth. So that's what happened after that. We wrote a lot of misconducts, and then they transferred them around the state, the ones that were involved the most in the riots. If they assaulted anybody, if they refused to lock up, pretty much a lot of them went to the Jackson prison I talked about. So a lot of them were transferred over there.
Yeah. So how did that affect you? Were you just chomping at the bit to get back in your prison, or did it kind of, make you nervous about that? And how did it affect you move on with your career from that point? How did it affect how you moved on with your career?
No, that's a very good question. When after the riot happened, the doctor, first of all, I had to keep seeing the doctor for my head injury, but he was dead against it. He wanted me stay off work. He wanted me to go on light duty. And back then you could talk to your doctor, right? Hey, I can handle it. I'm good. I need to get back there. So I was good. I mean, I pretty much, I don't know, but I put it behind me. It was one of those things that happened, but I guess because we all got out, we didn't have any deaths. There was 4 or 5 officers that could never return to work because of their injuries were too severe. So, of course, I felt very bad and sorry for them officers that were just not the same. However, many of us went back to work there, and we really had a camaraderie after that, believe me.
Yeah.
We had each other's back before then, but we really did, because we felt like we were very thankful and grateful and lucky that we all still were upon this earth after an incident like that. But it kind of puts your perspective a little bit different. When you've been there and done that, sort of, it's like, wow, how fast a unit can change, how fast a prison environment can go from normal to that, where the inmates are controlling the units.
Absolutely.
So, but if you just, you don't second guess yourself, you got to get that behind you, and go on. A lot of us, we did have some really good talks after that. I'm not aware of anybody that got any special help. Not saying it didn't happen, but I wasn't aware. We talked a little bit about that. We got together. Every anniversary would get together and talk about it if we could meet. So we formed a really strong bond between us. And it really did change my perspective on things, to the point where, like I said, things could think like nothing's going to happen. It's a routine day, and how things can change so quick. But for those of us that work in corrections, you can just look in someone's eyes when the incident's happening. You can see sheer terror. You can see how the damage that they want to do to another human being. So that never changed, what someone's capable of. But you can't look at everybody like that. To me, that was just a small amount of people that had an opportunity, seen an opportunity, and took advantage of the opportunity.
Right. That's interesting, because I've been in some of those situations myself, and I did kind of come to the conclusion that I saw that evil in their eyes. And that did change a lot with me on how I looked at prison and how I looked at inmates. I've had people say, well, I could trust that inmate or whatever. And I said, well, just stop for a minute, and I want you to think about that inmate, and you're the only thing stopping him from the front door. Now think you can trust him, because when those opportunities pop up, those inmates change. And that might be the best orderly you've ever had in your life. And now you're seeing him on the range, and you've got this large disturbance riot going on, and he's swinging a piece of pipe wanting to hurt somebody. So I think it did affect me, that portion of it, on how I perceived inmates. And so that's interesting that you say that. Where'd your career go from there?
Well, after that, like I said, I promoted up to captain at Huron Valley Center, as we talked about. I was only there in that position for a year, and a deputy director position came open, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to get this position. I just got my year in this position. Just got off probation, because we know as you promote, you're on probation again for another year. And so I thought I'd just throw my name in. And so I got a second interview, and I thought, wow, I guess I got a chance. And so went for the second interview. And I remember, I never forget this. After my second interview, I asked the director, I said, hey, do you mind if I take a tour? And he looked at me kind of funny. I think we can arrange that. So I don't know why I said that, but it just came out. I wanted to look at where I had a chance to be working, but I guess I was the only one to ask. And then after that, I got my tour, and I walked around the facility, and then I wrote him an email back, and I told him, some of the positive things that I saw during the tour. And I thought, there's a few things, if I had an opportunity, that I might like to talk to him about. And I thanked him for the tour, and that was it. So never thought anything about it. And then I get a call, hey, are you interested in coming over here as a deputy director? So I said, heck yes. So went over there. How it was, we had 6 captains. They had 2 for each shift, and then we had 46 supervisors. So, and 250 forensic officers. So it was a really large facility. And so that's what I was over, the 6 captains, who was over the unit supervisor and, of course, officers. So I was kind of not, past middle management. I'm up towards the upper end. And so really enjoyed that job. I was also in charge of policy and procedure, drafting, and also approving. Every 3 years we had to look that over. So when I was over there too, we had to make a move from an old building to a new building. So the state approved a $95 million new forensic center. And so that was quite a challenge, that we had to move everybody over, which it was really close. But we had to take them on Greyhound buses. That's what we chose to do. But that was a planning phase for like 3 years. And I was in charge of the move for that. So that took a lot of my time as well. Administratively, I worked with the builders, worked with the contractors. Okay, we went actually to a facility in Indiana to look at our security, what kind of security we wanted to put in there. So it was, I'm not going to lie, it was a very fun part of my job, because I never really experienced something like that. So that was a fun job where I could, try to have an influence on what kind of security systems we're going to put in to make sure staff are safe and the prisoners are safe as well. So did that. I was also, where we're going to probably end up, as you said at the beginning, I was also doing adjunct teaching, adjunct assistant professor. So I was doing that as well. But I thought, someday I'm going to want to retire. So I might want to try to set myself up in a better position to get hired. So I said, I always wanted to carry a gun while I'm on duty. So I found out parole officers can carry a gun. So again, put my name in the hat. I took a civil service test and put my name for a parole agent in Detroit, Michigan. Went for the job interview. When I was done, I thought it was real funny that one of the people that done the interview, he walked me out and kind of winked at me. And so I felt kind of good about the interview. He kind of said, you did really good. And then I got a call saying that I got the position. But guess where I landed? I landed in the mental health unit in Detroit. So I was like, oh my gosh, the mental health unit for parolees that experience mental health. So I said, my gosh, I worked with them in the prison. Now I'm going to be doing it in the parole field. So I didn't have it wouldn't have been my first pick selection. So anyways, did that. But a long story short, I had to take a pay cut. I had to take a pay cut because remember, I was supervising almost 300 people. And I'm a pro officer. I'm not nobody's boss as far as staff. Now I have to take orders again. But that was one of the best things that I did. I wanted to set myself up for my next career. I wanted to be well diversified in corrections, so I didn't have any experience in community corrections. So the best place to start would be parole, coming right from the prisons. So I really liked that job. That was really learnful time in my life where I'm just changing gears from working in a penitentiary all those years to working out in the field, out in the community. Instead of telling them to go lock up, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to see you at your house tonight.
So what did you learn the most being a parole officer after all those years seeing the other side? What surprised you, or what did you learn being a parole officer?
Well, I learned that the communication skills are still there. You got to be up and honest with offenders, parolees when you see them. Same principles, a lot of same principles from working in a penitentiary that really served me well as a parole officer. Had a lot of experience working with criminals on that side. So when they came out, I let them know right away that I had, I worked inside a prison. So that you could kind of see where the conversation was going. Like I said, I'm just a straight shooter with them. I told them as long as, and then what we have is the first it's called orientation. When they first come out of prison, you have to see them within, like the next business day or that business day when they came out. So many times the prison takes them right to the pro office the same time they get out. So they see us first. So you got to set the tone right at the get-go. Okay, I'm your pro officer. I'm here to help you succeed. There's going to be rules that you have to follow. You're going to have, most of the time, they had curfews. They had no drug usage, no drinking. They had to get a job. They have to pay their fines and costs. No illegal, things can be going on. So you just set the tone right at the beginning. So my communication skills that I learned in prison as a correctional officer served me well as a parole officer. Actually, it was a pretty seamless transition, to be honest with you. It was really easy. Some of the same prisoners that I supervised in the prison, remember I started back in the mental health unit. Guess what? I was supervising them 20 years later when they paroled. And so we had that conversation. I know you know me. You know how I worked in prison. The same thing out here. I'm going to help you succeed. I'm going to give you every tool you need to be successful out here. However, you got to hold it. You're ending up the bargain too. I'm going to be doing unannounced spot checks. I'm going to be going to your home when you don't know about it. I'm going to be asking people in the community. So that kind of same, you give me respect and I'll give respect right back to you. So served me well. And then I didn't have any experience in the probation field. So I transferred from parole to probation. And that was a whole different story. I mean, there's a lot of report writing in probation with the pre-sentence investigation reports, probation violations. So I was assigned to the gang task force in the county that I worked at. So had some gang experience as far as working in the prison system. Of course, we all know there's gangs in prison, and same thing when they parole or probation, we got gangs. So that kind of added a little bit up to it. Worked with the local law enforcement agencies, what we call a Nighthawk, which is going out with local law enforcement agencies, and we're doing spot checks on parolees and probationers to make sure they're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So we're knocking at the door on a Friday night at midnight. So a lot of times that don't end good for them. They're doing something illegal or they're violating their probation orders, taking them to jail. Then we're dealing with it the next business day in court. So did that. And then, like you said in the beginning, in 2015, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go out as a manager. I was pretty much doing the job myself, but I wanted to officially go out. So I interviewed for a probation manager position, and that's where I retired from. I did that 5 years before I retired in 2019. Wow. And that was over a larger office in Detroit.
What a well-rounded career. That's, I mean, you've literally went the whole circle in corrections that way. Now, from there, I guess you've taken on a full-time position as a professor at a university. Which university is that?
That's Madonna University. It's in Livonia, Michigan. It's only about 20 minutes from Detroit.
Criminal justice?
It's a smaller university. Yep.
Tell me about their criminal justice program there.
Okay. Start off how I transitioned between the two. I'll start there if you don't mind. Kind of tell listeners that in 2019, I was still a probation manager, and I started part-time. That's part-time teaching in 2003 as adjunct. So had some time, about 14, 15 years on the job as a part-time. And then a full-time position came up at Madonna University. And so the criminal justice chair knew me from me teaching part-time there. I said, yeah, I want to throw my name in the hat. I'm actually at a position where I was old enough and I had enough years to retire. So my initial plan was not to retire. I really liked what I was doing. I thought I was making a difference in the community. I had about 10 probation officers that I was in charge of directly and about 25 indirectly. I was making a difference. I was working with community partners. And then, so I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I went, threw my name in, sent my resume in, and then we went through the interview process. I had to do an hour lecture, like if I was lecturing in front of a criminal justice class. So guess what I did my lecture on? What I know big and dear is community corrections and corrections. So that was no problem. The hour actually felt like it went by in 5 minutes because I'm just telling my story. I'm just telling what I'm proud of. I'm proud of my roots, where I came from. So it went really well. So after that, I went to the interview, which was with 5 people, right from that lecture to the interview panel. And then I was lucky to get one of the positions. So I got the call, hey, you want to come on board full time? I said, absolutely. So when I was still working, of course, I wanted to make sure I had a job for, I wasn't retired. So went back to my probation job, and then I called my supervisor, and she actually was in the building, and I told her, come in my office. And so I had her shut the door, and I told her, hey, I was accepted, and I took a full-time position at Madonna University. I'm able to retire. Her reaction was kind of like, I wasn't expecting it, but she broke down and started crying. And I was like, wow. So she goes, I'm very happy for you, but I'm really sad to lose you. So that meant a lot to me. She didn't have to tell me anything, how much she depended on me. So I thought I did a decent job there by her reaction. And so I retired again in 2019. I started in that fall. So about end of August I started, and that's where I'm at today. Yeah, I think it works out well. When I was hired, we had 3 full-time professors. However, the criminal justice chairperson that hired me, she went to the business department as a dean. So it was actually 2 of us left. The other gentleman, who is actually the criminal justice chairperson now, Mr. Loria, his background is in police. He had 27 years and working in the police ranks, and he rose up to assistant chief. So I think I got the other side where you want to be well-rounded. If students have any questions on corrections, you know what, I can steer them. We do prison tours. We do internships. So I think it works out really well. About once a week, I'll get a reference check or someone wanting to know about the corrections field, how to get into it. So it works out really well that we're well-rounded in that field. We have, like I said, we have one in police, and then we have one I got correction side, and we have a bunch of adjuncts where I came from too that have like federal, lawyers, stuff like that.
So I know some places actually have criminal justice degrees specializing in corrections. Do you guys have that, or is it just criminal justice?
We do not. That's one thing that I wish we had. I brought it to people's attention, because what we have is we have certificates that we're called, We have one in Homeland Security. We have one in Private Security. So I'm trying to sell it. Maybe we can start with, let's get one in Corrections.
Yeah.
But believe me, that's on my radar. That's on my list. I would really like to have a program at our university that, it's a criminal justice / corrections degree. I think that's very important. I think that there's a lot of different jobs. I tell my students all the time, there's a lot of things you can do. You can start as a correction officer and retire as a correction officer. It's a very noble job. There's a lot of things that you'll be fulfilling in that career. However, that's not the end all. There's a lot of different promotional opportunities, like myself, where I was jumping all over the place. I was willing to drive. I was willing to step outside of the comfort zone, so to speak. But I said there's a lot of opportunity in corrections. So don't discard that. There's a lot of opportunity. So I'm like the voice of corrections in the academic world over at MySpace over here in Livonia. I'm always the first to say it. Now, when I just went to orientations where we meet new students and their parents, and I think it's funny, a lot of the students' parents will start talking, tell me about your career as a police officer. And I'm just thinking about, please. So I said, let me tell you about my career. So I'm real proud. I'm not mad at him for saying that, because that's kind of like the stigma, like in criminal justice, academic, everyone came from the police world. But I said, let me tell you about my career. So just like I said today, I start documenting, not lengthy, but just letting them know, hey, worked here, done this. Let me tell you, I'm very proud to say that I came from Department of Corrections.
Yeah. So with everything going on today, I mean, there's been law enforcement as a whole has taken a hit kind of with public perception, and, corrections is dealing with retention and recruitment. So is, police, regular law enforcement. What are you seeing from the students? What are they saying? What are they wanting when they come in for a criminal justice degree? What kind of students, and what's their thoughts?
Their thought process is, like I tell them, you guys are coming in at an opportune time. Back in the day, and you can maybe vouch for this as well, you might be interviewing against hundreds or thousands of people, and it's not just that way anymore. Like you said, retention is a very serious matter in today's law enforcement criminal justice field. So that's the first thing I say. You guys are coming at an opportune time. You guys can really pretty much write your own ticket where you want to work. Employers actually are coming to us, recruiting our students all the time. And I'm talking federal, state, local. They want to set up shop and do hiring events. A lot of them want to do hiring events for our seniors right on the spot. So they're coming at a good time. Now, like we know, too, how the defund the police slogan or times in our society is going through. I think it's like that was like the low end, but I think we're starting to climb up that. Hopefully it's going in the right direction and stay on that projectile, that we're going to go up where people are going to that people are going to respect and know that we're trying to do a job. We have a difficult job to do. Especially in corrections, we're unheard of. They don't know about it. As long as the people don't escape, everything's good. But it's a lot more that goes into that. We need professional officers. We need people that want to make a difference. And so on my students, I let them know, like I said earlier, I'll send them. We'll do tours right into prison. They're kind of scared, to be honest with you, when we first walk through there. Just like a correction officer, we have a few staff that go along with us, but if you see them when we go into the chow hall, there's thousands, maybe hundreds at least, and they're not surrounded, but they see the sheer number, so their eyes will light up. But every opportunity, every time that we go back and we talk about it, they really appreciate it, and they all say that it's a lot different than they thought, because they're at that time where they watch, documentaries and TV and stuff. And so they think of it looking a little bit different. But when we go in there, actually we went through where we went to a Braille place in one of the Jackson prisons where they do the Braille. So they turn over a school book over to a Braille where a person that's blind can read the book through their hands. And they have that service there. And then, so we went down there, we walked around and the prisoners did their talk. And then when we were done, when we got back up front, one of the students asked me, who was that talking to us? And I said, that was a prisoner. So she was like floored, like, said, no, that was a prisoner. They got their, they got an opportunity to do what they like doing, and they learned a good trade, and they're very marketable once they, if they do get a chance at parole, that they have a good skill set to do out there where they might hopefully be successful and be able to be contributing back to society. So
absolutely,
a lot of things exposing the students to new ideas, new things. Just don't be one-minded. Like, a lot of them want to be in CSI, they want to be a criminal investigator or forensic. That's fine and dandy, but guess what? A lot of times you got to start at the bottom. If you want to be a federal agent, we get a lot of that. They want to be an FBI agent or CIA or DEA. Guess what? A lot of times you have to have experience from somewhere. So, a lot of times I'd say if police work's not your route, maybe you can get your foot in the door in corrections. Start there.
Absolutely.
Try to steer them in the right direction. So we've done local jail tours as well. So don't forget about them guys for what, girls that work in county jails. Very important job they do as well there versus state, and what you did yourself is on the federal side. We all got the same mission in store. We have people come in the same way they go, make them safe, provide services for them, and then providing a valuable service to the community that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody out there listening wanted more information about the program you've got going, is there someplace they can reach you, an email or something, web address?
Yeah. It's rgreenwood@madonna.edu. That's my email, of course, at Madonna. I check that daily. If you want to get a hold of me, just send me an email, and I'll find. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you. I'll get it somewhere, but I'll be happy to share anything that I can, and for this noble field that I was fortunate to be able to retire from.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here, Robert. You have a fascinating story and one of the most well-rounded careers I've ever discussed with somebody, and I felt like that was just a great conversation. I appreciate you taking time to come on the Prison Officer Podcast and share that with everybody.
Thank you for having me, and everyone that's listening that still works out in corrections. Be safe in there, and hopefully you'll be getting to the retirement time of your life as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Robert. I would like to take a minute to thank one of our sponsors that make the Prison Officer Podcast possible. Omni RTLS is a company that I've been working with for the last year. I am proud to be part of this team of correctional professionals who have developed the best real-time locating system on the market today. With Omni's real-time location technology, you automatically know the accurate locations and interactions of all inmates, staff, and assets anywhere in your correctional facility, and you have this information in real time. Omni is cutting-edge software for today's jails and prisons. It is the only way to monitor every square inch of your facility while still being PREA compliant. Go to www.omnirtls for more information and to make your facility safer today. That's www.omnirtls.com. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.